The most important meal of the day, second breakfast.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another Second Breakfast podcast. I'm Andy Roth alongside Phil Duvall. Say hi, Phil.
Hello, Andy, and hello, Second Breakfast Nation.
And
hello,
Daniel Carlson. Good
Yes.
friend of the podcast. Daniel Carlson is back.
Hey, everybody.
I'm going to downgrade him to like an okay fan of the podcast because he hasn't been listening to the show.
I said
I have.
so. I said friend of
And
the
how do you
podcast,
know
but
I
only
haven't?
friends of the podcast would. But if you're not listening to our show, then you're not a friend of the podcast. So
Andy, by the way, Daniel, Andy, you may not know this about Andy because you don't ever listen to us anymore. But Andy Andy has grades. He doesn't say it officially, like there's not written down. But he'll be talking about someone who'll be like, good friend of the podcast, and then other people he'll be like, great friend of the podcast, and
That's
then
true.
like a very good friend of the podcast. So
that's true.
he called you a good friend of the podcast. That's not bad. But I'm just saying, there's room.
Middle
room
of the
for
pack.
growth.
That's all I ever shoot for. That's just I'm gonna do right here.
Listen, I want to aim low and
Too much
aim low and
pressure. I
aim,
can do better than this.
aim
right in here in the
aim
middle.
low and this.
Yeah.
Minimum competency. That's what we're aiming for.
I like it.
Minimum
Yeah,
competency.
exactly.
Exceeding expectations all the time.
So, Daniel, for those wayward souls who don't know who you are and why you're on the podcast, why don't you tell the good people at home your deal, your thing, your stuff?
Oh, okay. I'm a film and TV critic in my spare time. I've been doing that for about 10 years now. I've written for IndieWire, The Hollywood Reporter. I'm currently the managing editor at Pajiba.com, Pajiba.com. Wrote for the Willamette Week for a while. Just bounce all around. So
I want to just say the Pajiba.com's name belies how good it is, because it's got
Yeah.
a lot of good content, interesting articles. I think even if I don't agree with the person and some of the writing can be spotty when it's not you, but like interesting angles. You got guys and gals that come at things from interesting angles, and they choose interesting topics.
right.
So the name might not necessarily make people
Yeah.
jump at it, but know that if you are a pop culture person, if you like our podcast, if you like movies, definitely check out Pajiba.com. It's become something that I check out on a fairly frequent basis.
The website was born in like 2003. So that was in the time of the internet when folks just like made up weird words. I'm like, oh, this will be a website. And that's
Right.
Bad idea because you're stuck with
Right.
it.
Now it's yours. Now it's
Yeah, but
yours.
the problem is now people are making up weird words because there are no URLs left.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
True.
I mean, let's be honest. You know.
I don't
So
wanna-
so Daniel and I are gonna be honest, and Phil is going to lie. But that's
Yep.
pretty much situation normal around here at Second Breakfast headquarters, SBHQ.
I
if
was
you will.
born a female. My name was Glenda.
Glenn or Glenda. Okay, so what are we talking about today, Phil?
I'm excited about this topic. Andy Roth and Daniel
Nobody knows
Carlson.
what it is yet, so lay it on him. That's right. That's
I
right.
would-
Up there.
Oh man, don't start impatient. Like, get impatient, okay? But don't start impatient because we got a long show here, man. Come on, we got
There's
stuff
nowhere
to
for me
do.
go.
Okay, here's the deal. I forget who it was, but someone brought up this idea of talking about definitive movies. Was it best movie? I don't remember what it was, but Andy and I decided whatever their topic was, ours was better. Which was, we decided whatever they
always
came
true.
up with. Yeah, we edited their idea and didn't turn it into a mailbag, but we decided, let's talk about the movies that are definitive. Let's decide what movies are definitive for our generation. Which is really our wheelhouse. It's the kind of stuff we like to talk about, and we just say stuff like amazing and beautiful and wonderful over and over and over again, and wasn't it great? And then then the show's over, and we're like, wasn't that a great show? But we do love talking about definitive movies, but I thought it was a great opportunity to have Daniel back on the show. Your knowledge of movies is broad and deep, and yet not all the same movies as Andy, and Andy's not all the same movies as me. And we're all the same generation. So I think like we've got a lot between us that we can pull out and talk about. But here we just get to kind of sit and kvetch about what we think are our favorite movies of our generation. But like not just our favorite movies that like when you say movies for this group, this generation, what are the movies that define you?
Right.
or define your pop culture experience or your movie experience, right, Andy?
I agree with that.
And I mean, and do we just start naming movies? Is that the idea?
I think
or how
so.
are we going to do this?
I think so.
Can we just get the most definitive film of all of our time out of the way right away and just say, for our generation, the Star Wars movies are the most definitive movies? Is there any disagreement that, and I'm talking about the real ones, the first three.
Right.
Is there any disagreement about the fact that those are the most culturally definitive movies of our upbringing?
I mean, it's that or Transylvania 65000.
I literally, my wife brought that movie up last night, Andy. You bring up Transylvania 65000, but literally last night my wife was like, da 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 da, and then I was like, Pennsylvania 65000. And she goes, I thought it was Transylvania, and I was like, oh honey, it's a real song in real life. She's like, oh, it wasn't just that awesome movie from the 80s, and I was like, oh, I love you so much.
we got to go back to the beginning here. Okay.
Right.
I don't think I disagree.
I'm
with
not
you.
saying we're not about to talk about a bunch of other movies that are
No.
definitive. It's just
But I don't
Star
think I
Wars
disagree
for our
with you.
generation.
Daniel.
That's close to you agreeing.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I was thinking in terms of movies that defined a generation as those that commented on or tried to capture the zeitgeist of a particular age group,
Can I?
not just culturally huge.
Sure.
Sure.
So I think, but again, that's just two different ways to define
No, but if we,
similar things.
Andy, did you think we were going to do the same thing that he thinks?
I thought we would touch on both things, but
Okay.
to speak to Daniel's point, and Daniel, you feel free to shoot me down. I think almost as easily as we can say the Star Wars movies for Phil, your definition, Daniel, for yours, I think it starts and ends with John Hughes.
Yeah.
I don't even know. What, that's it. There we
I
go.
have problems. I know exactly why you're saying it, and I have a problem with it. But I mean, you know how. I mean, I like John Hughes more than almost any filmmaker alive. Well, he's dead, but any filmmaker around.
Sure.
I know it sucks.
Too soon.
I know. No. I don't even feel good about it. I actually was thinking
right.
he's alive, and then I'm
Right.
like, oh
Yeah.
god,
He's got to
no.
be. He's got to be.
My only concern with that is it wasn't catching, honestly, our generation. It was catching our older brothers and
So
sisters'
what's
generations.
interesting, but I agree with you, and yet, like,
It tapped into the generation that was not our parents' generation. It was generation of the people who were just old enough that the three of us were watching them going,
Right.
do we get to be
let's
like
also-
them? Like, we were 6 when Breakfast Club came out, so we
Yeah,
were not relating
that's
to
right.
Breakfast Club.
that's right.
Well, I mean, also for the cheap seats at home, let's go ahead and talk about what generation we're in right now. I will start. I'm like the leading edge of Generation Y. I turned 32 this year.
So you were born in what, 80?
82.
Okay. I was born, Andy and I were both born in 79.
It's true.
Okay, yeah. So
So we're
that's
the last year of Generation X.
tail end.
first
Yeah, so
year
we're
of
all
Generation
kind of
Y.
on like the border of Gen X, Gen Y. So
I'm
you
so
know,
disaffected.
Where do we, Daniel, how do you feel about the term that's being thrown around now, the millennials?
it's fine.
Is that us? Is that us?
That's
Yeah.
technically Gen Y because it's people who come of age in the new millennium, and I turned 18 in 2000, so that's kind of the first year of that.
Wow.
We're all just
Yeah.
so postmodern. It's not
it's
even.
true. It's true.
Right.
We're both-
We can't even choose one thing to call ourselves. That's how postmodern we are. We're like,
Yeah.
well, it depends on who you are. I mean, you could call us
We're
this.
just gonna walk
you could
around
call us
going da 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 the entire time. So interestingly, all right, okay. Here is my rebuttal. Although it's a rebuttal, it's more of a clarification because I don't disagree with anything you said, Phil. I stand by John Hughes because, and I know that you weren't commenting on the quality of his films.
Oh gosh.
But I know that. But like, I would also offer this as a generational movie, for our generation. Jaws, that came out before any of us were born, and yet
So then I'm unclear about what we're talking about. I'm not trying to be rude. I swear I'm not trying to be a jerk.
No,
I'm confused about what we're trying to talk about then because
when
I think about definitive movies of our generation, Star Wars, Jaws, Indiana Jones. No,
Star Wars.
Well, the first one did. The first one did,
Yes.
but the other two didn't.
Right.
The first movie I ever saw in the theaters was Return of the Jedi on opening day. My parents took my brothers and I out of school.
That's amazing. I love
It is amazing. Anyways, I remember Vader's face from when I actually saw it in the movie theater.
Let me
know anything about.
Let me throw this out there. We're also the first generation, however you define us. We're the first generation that had home video. So
We are the VHS generation.
So God, that makes it sound so old. But that's only because we are.
It just makes VHS sound awesome.
That's nice. You're like the guy who gets 8 tracks because the sound quality's better. Come on. So I think it is fair to talk about movies that everyone in our generation has seen, even if it wasn't released in our lifetime, like Jaws or Star Wars, and even if it didn't deal with our age group, like The Breakfast Club, like Pretty in Pink, 16 Candles. I think, because I'll tell you this, in much the same way, and this is the last thing I'll say about it, sort of to make my case. People who know me know that I'm from Texas, and yet I didn't grow up living Friday Night Lights. Okay, I went to a tiny white bread private school in an urban setting. Okay?
You went to Rushmore.
I did. I went to Rushmore. And functionally the only difference between Rushmore and my actual school is that Rushmore appears to be all boys, and my school is co-ed.
Right.
So, and yet, I instantly identified with Friday Night Lights. Superbad is a movie that I never said the words that came out of those two characters' mouths, and yet I know, it was so familiar to me, right? Because I could identify with it, and that's
especially if I had drank in high school. I didn't drink in high school,
right? Me neither.
But if I had, I just would have been one of those two guys,
right? And so when it comes to the fact that The Breakfast Club, I was not, a princess, a rebel, an athlete, a basket case.
No,
right?
I was literally none of those things.
But you know what? And this was the point the movie was making. We are all of those things. And so
I was a little bit of a princess.
You still are, sweetheart.
Thank you.
That's
okay.
The last thing I want to say. Daniel, you're not talking. I want you to talk.
Yeah, say stuff, Daniel.
Okay. Well, I think we're all making a lot of good points. I was thinking about the home video thing too. Movies carry forward generationally, so movies are experienced autobiographically. So something that you see at a certain age, you carry forward with you on home video and DVD, et cetera, et cetera. So, something like Raiders is going to be really influential for anybody that's our age because it came out when we were young and was on TV and on home video. So we had this. So I think that there are two big clusters that we're kind of talking about here. One is movies that might define our or different generations in that they comment on that generation's age or zeitgeist or culture, or happened to talk about it later looking back in hindsight. And there's also those that are just like giant cultural explosion movies that don't have anything to do with us per se, but are so popular they get carried forward across generations. For instance, The Matrix was enormous when I was 17. I wouldn't really consider it as saying too much about my generation.
Sure.
More about movie making at that time and et cetera, et cetera. So I think that there's, you see what I'm saying? There's two big clusters.
Yes, exactly. But every child our age grew up with some artifact of Star Wars in their house.
Sure.
I had a Han Solo gun.
Yeah.
Nice.
Congrats. That's the least controversial statement anyone has ever said. I mean, yeah.
But that's my point. That's exactly why, even if, I'm not even talking about, the commentary on our culture. I was thinking about, and we can talk, I'll talk about that all day. That's great. But when I was thinking about this conversation, I was thinking about the movies that formed, our idea of what a movie is, our idea of what, Star Wars and Ghostbusters and First Blood and Stripes.
Okay, so you were just thinking of super popular movies that we all knew about because they were so big we all had them on tape.
Or weren't. Well, Star Wars, they're super popular, but I'm also talking about a cultural, yes, that's what I'm talking about. The ones that if someone were to say, what did it mean to be a moviegoer in the 80s? like a real moviegoer, or to grow up in the 80s, not even a moviegoer. But that was how I was looking at it. So I'm willing to talk about whatever. Andy,
I'm gonna push back a bit on First Blood and Stripes, just because you know
they were mine. That was my little personal
and
formation. And I said for me.
First of all, hang on, real quick. Can I just say that I appreciate that you called it First Blood, its actual title, and not Rambo? Thank you.
You're first of all, you're welcome.
Yeah.
And secondly,
Who does that? Thank you.
I've seen Rambo like maybe twice. I've seen First Blood like squillions of times. It's over, Johnny.
Daniel,
So.
I mean, this proves that you don't watch the show because if
We
there's
talked
one
about this
thing-
one episode ago.
because
Oh,
if
sorry.
there's one thing that Second Breakfast is all about, it's about fact checking, precision. That's at least two things, but verisimilitude. That's a third thing, and it's longer than the first two combined.
Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition.
Nobody. Okay. So, what are some other movies? Okay.
Wait, so where are we going with this then?
I think we can talk about both things. We're awesome. Daniel, you have forgive me. I forget the term you use for movies like this, but there's.
So you're not a regular reader of my stuff? Is that where we're going?
No, that's not where we're going.
The wheel is on the other shoe.
Nope,
the shirt
nope,
is on the other back.
Nope.
The hand is in the glove.
Nope.
That's right.
What just happened to my face?
The lotion is in the basket.
The lotion is not in the basket.
No, we never go to the pit. Never go to the pit in the basement.
Ever.
Movies. That's what you're talking about.
Hey, could you get in the back of the van?
Wait.
Are you about a size 10?
Wait. Was she a great big fat person? Okay, so
She was a large girl, yes.
yes, sir. She was a large girl. So movies like The Princess Bride, which I would also argue is absolutely a kitchen sink movie. Is that what you call it?
Yeah, I just.
Well, that was a good article you wrote, Daniel.
Thank you. In desperation, I just started calling them in my head movies, like those ultimate. They've got drama, comedy, suspense, action, romance. The comedy works and doesn't detract from the drama. The drama doesn't mean the jokes don't work. They're not spoofs. They're not satires. They're like everything. So something from like Princess Bride or Sneakers or Raiders, Tootsie, Midnight Run, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang.
Yeah.
Like there's tons of out there.
I'd throw the Goonies in there. I mean, the romance is of a
Goonies,
younger.
great idea.
I would take Kiss Kiss Bang Bang right out of that list, but that's okay.
And I would
That's
take it and put it right back in. So you know what? 2-1
fine.
big guy. Also, though, Phil.
Right.
So
check
mediocre.
out this guy. He's like, "Oh, you don't read my column," and I was like, "Boom, column read."
There it is.
Andy,
By the way,
I
let's all
stand
together
side
on-
by side with you, shoulder to shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
You're my brother in arms.
Indeed.
So, anyways, blah blah blah. I love the idea. I think the least offensive thing I could say right now is true and so milquetoast, which is that the movie might be my favorite genre of movies.
Yeah. I love
I'm like, what is it? It's just.
Well, I was watching Sneakers for the millionth time and realized one of the reasons I keep coming back to that movie that's more than 20 years old is that it has everything that I look for in a lot of movies, you know?
I essentially think that on a very sort of overtly campy and explicit level, that's essentially what Tarantino makes every single time he makes a movie.
Right.
Like, would you really call this movie dramas? Would you really call them comedies? Would you really call them actions?
I'd call them almost too self-aware for their own good.
They are almost, except he's still the best that there is. I mean, they are almost, but it works. The thing about Tarantino is that he is self-aware, but it's so much a part of who he is, and it is not a presentation. It is
Right.
authentic to
I
who
probably
he is.
disagree with the presentation aspect of it. I think one of the things I like about movies is that they believe what they're selling. One of the reasons I don't dig on the Grindhouse movement too much is there's too much artifice and winking and self-awareness in there.
I agree with you about the Grindhouse movement. All the movies that Tarantino likes, I don't like. But but Inglourious Bastards works. Like it.
I'm one of those guys that think he peaked at Jackie Brown, and everything since then has been a little different.
Oh, so you're one of those guys who hasn't seen any of his movies since Jackie Brown. Got it.
No, I'm those guys
So-
who've seen them all.
Okay,
So here's
I
the
love
deal.
Jackie Brown, so don't get me wrong.
I'm gonna ding 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 retreat to neutral corners.
We're not gonna
Here's the
fight.
deal.
We're not gonna fight.
We're already
We
fighting.
fighting?
It's like Thanksgiving in here. So I don't know. I'm drunk. I started
You-
this. This is this
Then it
is
is like Thanksgiving.
this is gin. So
Straight.
straight. So I love movies, and I love that you coined the term movies. I don't necessarily think that, and I'm not. I know that you're not saying this, but I want to be explicit about it. I don't think that being a movie automatically enters you
Oh,
into
for
the
sure.
conversation for generational,
No, not at all. We just kind of got off on a tangent there.
which is weird because it's us.
I know we're so focused usually.
It's true. Good night, folks. So let's talk about because I would say that like Princess Bride, absolutely a generational movie, and I would say it's a movie. Sneakers,
Right.
just a total blast of a movie. Definitely your definition of movie. It's a movie.
Not remotely generational.
Not to my everlasting chagrin, because
Right.
I defy someone to have a better time watching a movie than at that movie.
You know,
But and man, that movie had everything. Like what kicks it up? What kicks it up from any
Well,
movie? It doesn't have to be a movie.
haven't had really a great Generation Y movie yet, in large part because the members of that generation are just now getting into their early 30s.
Yes.
So the stories haven't happened yet. The filmmakers haven't happened yet. I mean, when you look at somebody like Gen X, you've got John Hughes. You can look at the Boomers, both the movies that came out when they were maturing and those that have come out since. It looks back on that. We can talk about those in a minute. But, you know,
No, you tapped
there
into
is no Gen Y version of
when you first talked about movies that tap into our particular zeitgeist. I was
Right.
like, they're just starting. I was the one who maintained when it came out. I'm not the one. I'm sure someone else said it too. But when we were talking, I said to Andy, like, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World is the first movie that feels like it's made for my generation.
Right.
Like it feels like it was made for people who just played video games, weren't necessarily gamers, just played them.
Yeah.
Were a part of our lives. Rock and roll and video games and romantic love stories with girls with dyed hair. Like, is this designed just for me and my heart? Like, what is this? And then I would say the same about what was it? Oh, Wreck-It Ralph. I mean, Wreck-It Ralph was like made for our generation for the same reason. I know it was made for kids, but the way that the game moves, the way that they chose the kinds of characters they chose, and the way that they designed them, I mean, it was clearly a takeoff on Mario and all that stuff, and our version of Mario. You know,
Right, yeah.
That's
I think they did a really good job with the references there, but I think if we're talking about stuff that's defined a generation, or at least attempted to capture the zeitgeist or comment on it or be some kind of reflection, it's gonna take more than just references to Metal Gear Solid. I mean, it was a really cute movie.
I'm not sure it will. I mean, our generation is pretty shallow.
It's fairly meta.
but
we
no,
are the meta generation.
We are the meta generation. I'm not. Here's the deal. I'm not saying it's definitive, Daniel, but I'm saying we're now seeing people from our generation making movies.
Right, yeah.
And that means that they have the sensibility of people our generation.
Right.
That's all I mean. Like here's a great example. Reality Bites. Okay?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
For Generation X.
Mm-hmm.
It's a pseudo-definitive movie because it tries so hard to be definitive and it came around right when people were calling Generation X.
Yeah.
It was right when Ben Stiller was like getting big, and it like had Ethan Hawke in it at exactly the right moment, and had all the people that were in it at exactly the right moments.
Right.
So even if it's actually not that good of a movie, and the ending makes me want to stab something in the eye. I mean, it's my least favorite ending of almost any movie ever, next to maybe The Graduate. But it's essentially the same ending as The Graduate. But it manages to be Ben Stiller, a Gen Xer, trying to make a movie that is referential to his generation. And so he is John Hughes is a baby boomer, essentially, making a movie for Gen Xers. Or he's in a weird space, John Hughes.
Yeah.
Because he was like, he was basically the baby boomer Gen X, like, line. Because he was like 10 years older than the people that were making movies with him. Or 12 years, right? But, like, I'm trying to say, like, we are now seeing people, I don't even know the people who made Wreck-It Ralph, I don't know their names, but those guys, the Lego Movie, and the people who made the Lego Movie also made 21 Jump Street, which is a TV show from our generation, and they made a comedy movie out of our generation, out of a TV show from our generation. These are things where that people that we grew up with.
Right.
It's like when you go to the hospital and doctors are our age.
Right.
And right after you stop thinking, what the hell was I doing with my life? This guy's a doctor. What have I done?
I think it's interesting you bring up Jump Street because that's one of the few comedies I've seen in recent years that, in really interesting, funny ways, makes references really tailored to Gen Y, folks that are now in their like early 30s, late 20s, because they were in high school. The characters were in high school in the late 90s. The music references were there. You know, Jonah Hill's younger character was really into Eminem, and now when they go back, they've gone through a cultural shift where the people that used to be geeky are now more popular. The old Stratus has been kind of, flipped on its side. So that I thought played really well to me because I understood all that perfectly. I mean, the fashions and stuff that were mocked in the late 90s for geeks wearing them 5-6 years later, people were like, oh, that's fine, that's great. Yeah, be that person. So
the
I
one
thought
strap versus the two strap.
Exactly, yeah. If I don't know if I would go as far as to say right now in terms of its ability to define the generation, but in terms of its skill at commenting on it and making jokes for it and talking about it growing up, I think it's done better than most movies recently. I think that's what a lot of these movies are going to do really well, is that they're going to talk about the generation passing through time. They're almost always going to be looking back on that generation.
Yeah.
Something they did previous. I mean, the Big Chill was about nostalgia.
Yeah.
American Graffiti was about nostalgia. Hughes movies were about nostalgia while they were happening.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the central scene of The Breakfast Club is where they're just sitting around talking and and just like
And that's why it fits our generation, by the way, that scene, because that was all of our favorite moments in high school. Every single person, and I'm guessing, I actually don't know this about either of you, but I will say it definitively and dare you to prove me wrong. Every single one of us has a moment we remember that was one of our favorite moments from an otherwise terrible period of our life, where we were sitting in a room with people that we didn't remember exactly how we got in the room with that particular group, and it was weird, and yet somehow all of us were choosing to bear something of ourselves, hopefully souls, not body parts, and like sharing. And then like that night ended because it had to, because nights end, and then you went back to school the next Monday and it wasn't like that again.
I want to be very explicit in that I am not asking this question. I do not want to know your answers, although I bet I know your answers. The definitive question raised by any movie by any quote unquote generational movie since I was born is, in my mind, and I know I'm not the only one who thinks this, what happens Monday to The Breakfast Club? Are they friends or are they not? Are you crazy?
What kind of Disney World do you live in? They're not friends.
See, and I grew up thinking, oh God, of course they are.
No, of course not.
No, you're probably right, but it's what I thought.
Date for a while, break up before college. Brian the Nerd is still alone. Nobody talks to him.
If he's still alive.
Dear Second Breakfast Nation, do you remember less than 30 seconds ago when I said
they're not friends on Monday? That's the point.
I explicitly am not asking what the answer to this question is. I just want everyone listening and watching this podcast.
Couldn't resist it.
Then you shouldn't have brought it up.
You're terrible people.
You don't get to introduce rhetorical questions.
Yeah, that's a
don't
bad idea. No. Andy, what kind of...
Don't I?
Yeah, no. I'll answer your rhetorical question every single time. No.
I'm sorry. I know I wasn't supposed to answer it, but...
No, but that just goes to show you the difference between you and me, Daniel.
Yeah.
Because in my hope against hope, the fact that we don't see it means there's a possibility that they do.
Right.
And that's
the possibility too, if they suddenly cease to exist in the real human world they lived in the previous 90 minutes.
Do you not?
High school is.
Wait a minute. Do you not believe in transformative experiences?
I do, but I also believe in the fact that the real world crumbles them over time.
So the real
you have to keep having them. You don't go like, oh, we're transformed. Life's great now. That'll erode.
No, but it has an impact on you and changes something fundamentally about who you are.
Sure.
And even if it's just a little bit, and if you keep having them, you're not the same person you were before.
Yeah, but the Breakfast Club is like when kids go to summer camp and make friends and then try to write letters that fall, and it just
except that you never see them again.
Yeah.
You don't think Bender and Molly and Claire like ever?
No, I'm sure they hooked up for a while, but they broke up before college.
Oh, well, they definitely broke up before college. Don't get me wrong. They definitely broke up before college. But yeah.
But
no,
the survival for the rest of one's life of a high school relationship is not indicative of a transformative experience not being truly transformative.
Right. I'm sure that they have nice memory.
I think you're tapping. I think we might need to change the subject soon, only because you're tapping into what is clearly a way too emotional thing for me, which is that I have probably lived my entire life since adolescence in the land of like hope that the impossible ridiculousness of that could become true.
I have a serious question.
Does that make sense what I just said?
It does to me.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Now you can ask your question.
Daniel, when was the last time you watched The Breakfast Club?
I don't remember.
Okay, good.
Recently, in the last year, probably, maybe?
Last year for me as well, or two.
Right. But not so recently that you can remember when. Right?
Not the date. Right, not the date, but yeah.
No, but no movies like that if it didn't watch it yesterday.
Pretty much. It was yesterday or some other time.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
The other day.
Great. I'm going to choose to ignore that because I know that's not true. You're too young even for early onset Alzheimer's. Okay, so whatever. I stand by my statement, and the reason I stand by it is this: we could have just had an argument about some. Not that scene in The Breakfast Club is minutia. It's not. It is integral to the plot and to the meaning of that movie. But we could have had an argument, the same argument, changing only the particulars of the plot, about Star Wars, about The Princess Bride, and I think about Jaws, about other John Hughes movies,
specifically, I think Breakfast Club and Ferris Bueller's. I mean, we could talk about Pretty in Pink for a lot of girls, especially, but for boys, Breakfast Club and Ferris Bueller's are the ones. I mean, we all love Uncle Buck and this and that, but those two specifically. Okay, those of us with hearts and souls love Uncle Buck. You cynical old man, Daniel.
I'm not cynical for disliking something you like. I just don't like the movie that much as the other ones.
You're not cynical. You're just not a good
it's not as good of a movie as the other two. The other two movies are masterpieces, and Uncle Buck is like he's like that. He's like Uncle Buck. He's like this shaggy uncle. It's not perfect, but it's special.
Phil, what I'm doing here is arguing your definition of generational.
Hit it. Yeah.
Because otherwise, Star Wars isn't a generational movie. And of course it is.
Sure.
And of course it is.
Sure.
And
Goonies? Where does Goonies fit in on this?
I think it's absolutely generational. I think
But it actually was kids our age while it was being made.
Which is interesting, but I don't think it makes it any more or less generational than any of the like does that make sense? Like I don't think it.
Well, no, it straddles both categories.
Oh,
the Daniel version of the question and mine.
Fair,
mm-hmm. Right?
I like that. I will throw except for the just the literal age of the characters. I will throw Princess Bride in that same sort of straddling category because everybody because you can't. Yes, you could wish to be, depending on your gender, you could wish to be Princess Leia or Han Solo or Darth Vader or Luke.
I think we've gotten to the point. In our generation, and Daniel, I can't wait to hear your response to this. Regardless, you could go either way, and I have no idea where it's going to go. but I can't. I think we're now at the point where The Princess Bride not being listed among greatest movies of our time or greatest of the 80s, things like that, lists like that, it's a little embarrassing, actually, because it completely denies how fundamentally important that movie is to a whole generation of people, and how popular it is, and how much of second, like it is as big in our minds as a lot of these other movies, and yet it is completely, it's not mentioned in best of lists. It's not there. It's not brought up because it's a comedy, because it's a spoof, because it's a movie, I guess. I don't know, but it's not. Movies don't get the respect that like Richard Attenborough movies get. You know what I mean? Like, it's, I don't know. Am I making
I honestly
someone
didn't
say
know.
something?
I honestly didn't know that it wasn't starting to be
Yeah.
listed in
Yeah, I
lists
mean,
like this.
it needs to be. If it,
I just popped over to. I'm doing some research right now. I'm seeing it's listed a lot of times as on like great movies, great comedies, classic movies, classic romances, classic stories. I think it's regularly referred to as a great one, and because
I think it is on Facebook by our friends.
right, but also by people who get paid for it. Like, I mean, I think it's a really well respected and well liked movie for a lot of great reasons, including the fact that it's really, really good, and it's one of those that we all grew up with.
Yeah.
And I can continue to revisit it. Like, I'll revisit a movie from like my childhood and be like, "Oh, this is terrible." I'm having a great time watching it because it's nice.
Because
it's
nostalgia
relaxing.
factor, right?
But who are we kidding? Listen, Krull is not that good. But when I watched The Princess Bride, I'm like, hey, this is still really great. You know?
Do you know what movie from my high school time is not as good as? I mean, I saw it 3 times in the theater, and because it was like right in my wheelhouse of darkness, and now and I feel bad saying it even. No, it's not that big of a deal.
Oh, okay.
The Crow. The Crow.
Okay.
When The Crow came out, it was like, I mean, it just tapped right in. Like, Henry Rollins and the Violent Femmes were on the soundtrack, and like it was like, and not together, unfortunately, but it was like dark, and he had died, so there was a sadness and mystery around it, and it was just like, and it was violent, but like comic booky violent, but it wasn't comic booky the way we think about it today.
Right.
And it was just like, this is not that great of a movie. But when I saw it, I was like, this is amazing that they made a movie like this. Like, it just like.
Yeah, I remember it being huge, and now what I mainly do is try and avoid people that are still really into The Crow, because there's usually some other issue going on with them that has caused them to hang on to The Crow for 20 years.
Yeah.
I'll say this about The Crow, though. The people who would have been into The Crow then, but are younger, are into Sin City, and The Crow's a much better movie than Sin City.
Much better movie.
Just
Yeah.
I mean,
well,
much.
The Crow has the advantage of not being made by Robert Rodriguez.
That's true. That's a plus for any movie, really.
He's not that good. He's not that good.
No.
Only in his job.
You might even say he's bad.
Only,
Yeah. What might?
Which makes me sad because I want to like his movies. I really do.
I didn't hate Sin City, actually. It was one of the few of his that I didn't hate.
Here's one that I
hate it
think
either.
actually speaks to part of Gen Y. Tell me if I'm crazy.
Okay.
Knocked Up.
See, now we're getting
Nice.
the movies of and this is like a tiny difference, but now we're getting the movies of like your college age versus we were out of college by then, and that actually matters. Like,
So was I. That was out of college by then.
were you? Okay. But now we're getting to the movies of like our 20s. And I'm so defined in my head by the 80s, but like, yes, but Knocked Up is really important for our generation. Wet Hot American Summer is super important to me. I don't know.
What do you guys think about?
Knocked Up is incredibly important for our generation. And
Agreed.
40
I think Knocked Up works because it was about those people at that age living that kind of life, playing versions of themselves. The relationship of it, the way it was executed, it was very of that era.
Yep.
I have 2 movies to bring up. They are not in any way related, but I'm interested to get your takes on them. I don't think either of them reach generational, although I love them both unconditionally. Clueless and
great. On my list.
and E.T.
Also great.
E.T. fits the category, my version of the category perfectly, and
Agreed.
Clueless fits Daniel's category perfectly, I think. I think I was never a
Okay.
big Clueless fan. It's fine, but it wasn't one of the ones that, like, I didn't see it when
Right.
it came out. I saw it like 3 or 4 years later.
Interesting. Okay.
Clueless was huge when we were teens. It came out in like 94, I want to say, 95. So I mean, it was. Let me check real
I
quick.
feel like it came out later, but I could be wrong.
No, 95.
Oh, what do you know?
So it was huge when we were teens. I find myself quoting it probably once a week.
Yeah.
The screenplay is great. It was one of those movies that seemed to cut through a lot of the junk and actually talk in its own stylized way about teens and teen culture, because I mean it was Amy Heckerling. She also did Fast Times.
She did.
So, great script, great characters, really fun story, and one of those that was like such a major movie for people in high school and in their teens at that time that it might not play the same way to people that are
Now-
14
Sure.
today.
Right, now here's I brought this up before, and it's one of those things where it's like I just sound like an annoying human being, but shut up, Andy. Just shut up. Okay? No joke.
I'll
Just
save
a
it for the
second.
end.
No. Just hold off.
I'll
hold
save it
off.
for the
Okay. Okay, thank you. But Daniel, did you have older brothers and sisters?
No.
Okay. I have two older brothers. One's 6 years older than me, and one's 9 years older than me. So for you, Clueless makes perfect sense. For me, it's Heathers and Pump Up the Volume and Say Anything,
Right. Yeah.
which are about 7 or 8 years too old for you, and still about 5 or 4 years too old for me. But I was
Right.
watching them when they were coming out, and I
Right,
was
yeah.
watching them like my brother bought it, and then when he left the house, I went and grabbed it and watched it because I had a VCR in my room because I was a crazy person. So like I was watching. So for instance, like I had Stripes, and this is true, memorized when I was like 5. Which there's all sorts of unhealthy things about that.
So many unhealthy things.
But it's true. So like it's a weird conversation for me to have. It's like, why when we start talking about like Ghostbusters, Raiders, E.T., Star Wars, I'm like yeah, and then we start to talk about like Knocked Up and Clueless, and you were like Eminem in high school, dude. I believe you. I never listened to Eminem, and like because by the time I got to high school, I started going even older. But I grew up. I really think of myself as a child of the '80s, and I would imagine you think of yourself as a child of the '90s.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's
We're
the thing.
3 years, and we're only 3 years difference. You and I.
Right. We're on that weird little gap where
Yeah.
major movies for me, aside from things like Star Wars that were there when you were a kid,
Yeah.
started coming around when in like 91, 92 when I'm 19 years old. So like
Right.
major childhood movies for me were like The Mighty Ducks, something like that.
Right.
You know.
Sure.
And I was just like a minute too old for Mighty Ducks
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
because I saw it and I was like, okay. And like I have friends that are a couple years younger than me, just a couple, like your age, and they're like,
Right.
"Oh, the Mighty Ducks movies movies like plural, were so important to me growing up."
Yeah.
I'm like
Could
Missed
talk
it.
to you
Missed
about
it.
all 3 of them.
right, missed it.
Detail.
Yeah, missed
Yeah.
it. I just missed it.
But then any of those people see the original Bad News Bears and their mind just goes.
Oh man.
That was with Keanu Reeves, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Who are you?
Oh my god.
No, but so I mean it is a weird thing for me to have like so that I was going to bring up literally when you were talking about Clueless in high school. For me, it really was like Heathers
Right.
and Pump Up the Volume was, if you want to watch a movie
It's
that
so early 90s, it's amazing.
it
true.
defines
Christian Slater's
defines
hair.
me. It defines my high school experience and my high school experience in terms of I didn't have any of the things that happened in that show. Well, no, actually, I knew some kids that killed themselves. It was a really dark high school movie.
Yeah.
And it was just older than me, but it was my brother's age. Like Christian Slater is my brother's age. Lloyd
Right.
Dobler is my brother's age.
Right.
So those movies were like, I was watching being like, oh man, like that's what I'm waiting for. Like, okay, I'm going to tell you guys something. And I'm going to pretend we're not on the air and that people aren't going to listen to this. I wrote really bad poetry in high school. I didn't show it to anybody. I didn't get it published.
You're
But
the
I was-
only one.
I was but I was going to write. This was like freshman year, but I was going to like try to put it out there in like my high school, like, you know, like whatever. And my pen name was going to be Lloyd Dobler
Oh, buddy.
because
Oh my God.
nobody my year
Did the
actually
beginning of every line spell out the name of the girl that you were in love with?
because nobody my poetry was more like the girl and say anything like what's her name? Lily. Lily.
Oh,
Taylor.
that'll never
Joe
be
lies
me.
when he cries.
Joe lies when he cries. When he cries. But like.
And don't you
because-
ever think it.
Don't you ever think it? Because that movie no one else my age had seen, because it was like
Right.
older brothers and sisters were watching it. So like I felt like I had this secret language, that worked for me. And that's obviously didn't make
so-
me
That's so interesting.
more. I don't know. Anyways,
It's
so
more of a
like,
poet. You
And my
you have the
poetry
soul of
was
a
like-
poet.
my poetry was basically, and this is going to tell you like just how specifically nerdy I was. My poetry was essentially knockoff Henry Rollins poetry.
Oh.
I know.
Phil,
There's not even a joke to make about that, because that is the joke.
Phil, I
That's
want you
the
to
whole
know that I
joke.
am 100% serious right now. I have never loved you more than I
Yeah.
love you in this
I'm
moment.
so embarrassed. I'm like getting red. Can you tell? I'm like,
Buddy.
this is the truth of me. No, but this is the truth of me.
I've
Like
never loved you more.
Henry Rollins, like spoken word
He
stuff
speaks
when I
to
was
us all, man.
he started really getting into spoken word right when I was like hitting teenage years, and
Yeah.
he really like, and he was working through his own stuff and a lot of adolescent stuff, even though he was older, right at that moment for me. And then he wrote poetry books, which now I still have some of his books. Literally have some of his books of poetry, and I'm like, I'm not going to read these, but I can't throw them away.
Right.
Like I
Yeah.
can't get rid of them. And so I was really tapping into that darkness in me and loving Lloyd Dobler and idolizing the romanticism of that character. All very bad ideas, by
Here's
the way.
something
Everything
that-
I'm saying.
Here's something that I find interesting, because Heather's I saw too young. I mean,
Yep.
too young.
Yeah.
But Say Anything, Phil, you showed me for the first time. I was in college the first time I saw it. It was just one of those that I just missed. And they both, but when I look back on sort of my adolescent experience, they both feel like they both feel of a piece.
Yep.
In the same way that way
yeah.
the Breakfast Club does. So
Yeah.
so interestingly, I think this is true for most generational movies. And this, I think, is the last thing I want to say on the subject, because I'm done, sort of. Although I could talk to you guys forever. I think something that's true for both definitions is that it doesn't matter when you see them. It doesn't matter when you see them because there is something, interestingly, because we're talking about something that is specific to a period. Even things like Star Wars, like. It's specific to a time period, which is why we can say they are generational. That is a specific time period. There is something that is timeless about the way they fit in to that time period and the way they speak to the people who are of that time period. Does that
Yep.
make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Daniel, what else?
I'm spent. That's it. I'm done.
Well, no, I feel the same way. I think movies are generational based on the fact that you might see them at a certain time with everybody else in your group. But movies are also, like all art, experienced autobiographically. So I might not see a movie that was, quote, generationally important for my group until years later, but I'm still able to tap into those feelings.
Yep.
You know?
Mhm.
So I don't feel like I've missed out on something like that. I think that it's just a matter of realizing that you're going to see things at different times than everybody else, and that kind of shapes your own view of the generation. Like Phil, we're like way into Stripes, way too young. That's not wrong. It's just the fact that happened to shape your experience that
Yeah.
generation.
If that's,
So-
if that's wrong,
so
I don't
here's-
want to be right.
Yeah, I know, it's
I don't
true.
think we're going to have real signposts of the current generation on film, like what this experience has been like for a while yet. The only one that seems to capture it all, even part of the zeitgeist, might be The Social Network. But beyond that, it's going to be a while. So
What a dreadful movie masquerading as a good movie. I don't even want to get into that.
Woof.
I feel like Mugatu in Zoolander. I really do.
taking crazy pills.
Yes, Latigra, like Ferrari, they're all the same look. That's how I feel about Aaron Sorkin, and I just feel that way. And I'm not going to change. I'm not going to change for you or for anybody. So, anyways, I want to know before we go from each of you, if you could name one, I've named, for instance, Say Anything and Pump Up the Volume and The Crow as movies that were essential, like, to my formation, especially teenage. I'm really interested in teenage years. For my formation in teenage years of how I was developing my personality and understanding myself, like personal movies to me. I'm wondering if you could name a couple that weren't necessarily Raiders of the Lost Ark, E.T., Goonies movies,
Right.
like that weren't made by Steven Spielberg or George Lucas, essentially, or John Hughes. If there were movies for you that fit that bill.
Andy, fired up, man.
Ooh, well, I'm sorry to go chalk, but the first two that pop into my head are Princess Bride and The Goonies. They formed me as a person and as a movie watcher.
Yeah.
But going a little bit farther off the beaten path, or off the beaten path at all, I would say Heathers.
Okay.
Heathers was big for me, weirdly big for
Yeah.
me. I would say this is so weird. I don't even know why it affected me the way it did, but still one of my favorite movies of all time, and one of like when I think of like badass, like what do I think of? I think of the original. I think of Escape from New York, which I saw when I was too
Nice.
young, and it has no bearing. It has no bearing on anything that happened in my childhood. But I cannot think of becoming a movie fan. I cannot think of I had thoughts like, how would Snake Plissken react to this situation?
Yeah.
And so I think that would
First-
be.
First Blood was like that for me because I grew up with it, like watching it again way too young. But I remember First Blood was probably the first action movie I watched. And I don't think I can have this conversation about movies that are definitive to our generation and culture
Yep.
without saying out loud the words Terminator 2, Judgment Day, and Pulp Fiction.
I also want to add to that.
And Die Hard and
Die
Lethal
Hard.
Weapon. And Lethal Weapon 2. I mean,
Die Hard, while doing Project Melway has led me to sort of reevaluate what I think about Lethal Weapon versus Lethal Weapon 2, although they're both wonderful, and why would I need to choose? In terms of things that meant a lot to me growing up,
Yep.
Die Hard and Lethal Weapon 2,
Yep.
in terms of action movies,
Yep.
full stop. There you go. Daniel, I've given you enough time. Go.
Yeah, Die Hard was definitely on my list too. Like I saw that when I was homesick from school. My mom was like, "Here, you can watch this." That was awesome. Thanks, Mom.
That was a solid call on Mrs. Carlson's
Hugely
part.
influential movie. Like growing up, I was like, "This is an adult movie I get to see." It's really cool. It really got me excited about lots of different types of movies. It's still my favorite action movie. It's still fantastic.
Sure.
Um,
You see boobs as he's walking by the poster.
You sure
exactly.
do.
It's got it all.
Girls.
Like, Pump Up the Volume. I'm sorry, I'll talk about that some other time. Go
When
ahead.
I was, 15, 16, I saw like Rushmore and Swingers around the same time. So those were both really important. I was
Swingers was on HBO last night, dude, and I was watching it. I haven't seen it in like forever. It is
still really good.
so tight.
It's so money.
So good.
It's
Still really good.
So good.
And now I appreciate them for a lot more the technical aspects that I didn't understand even at the time.
Yeah.
Just at the time, I really clicked with the story and the emotion and the fact that it was these interesting worlds that didn't quite look like other stuff that I'd seen.
Yep.
So in terms of like growing into movies and that were important to me as a person growing up in like my teenage years, Rushmore, Die Hard, Swingers for sure.
Interesting.
Huge.
I actually
So funny. It's that
Yeah.
we were in college at Rushmore. I mean, it's that right there.
Yeah, I was like late high school.
I have an interesting relationship with Rushmore because another movie that it got compared to a lot right when it came out was Election, the Alexander Payne movie, and
Yeah.
Just watched it again today. Literally finished before we did this.
awesome.
Wow.
And both great movies.
Mhm.
I went around saying that I thought Election was a better movie, and I'm not interested in talking about the two of them with better
Right.
whatever. But it was because I went to Rushmore along
Yeah.
Daniel with your lovely wife. I went to the school that Rushmore was based on and filmed at, and I didn't want people to think that I was like, oh, if I say Rushmore,
Right, yeah.
people will think that it's just because but I actually felt that because, and I think it was because I didn't want people to think that so strongly that I like made myself not like it as much as part of me
Understood.
was going to. And yet over the next like few months I just couldn't shake it. I could not shake it. And then I was in college. It was filmed Phil and I's freshman year, and it came out I guess our sophomore year. Or the summer after our sophomore year, I think. I'm not sure. And I saw it a second time on home video, and I was just like, I was like, I'm smitten. I couldn't even,
Yeah.
I couldn't
Yeah.
even deal with it. I couldn't even deal with how much it spoke to me, and I forgot that it was filmed at St. John's. I just did. You know?
I want to before we close just say that people make fun of the 80s culturally, mostly angry liberals who are projecting backwards, but there are phenomenal movies made in the 80s, and it's not just because we were born in that time. And there are also dark and deep movies, and there are fluffy things that will define us whether we want them to or not, like Top Gun.
Right.
And there are really wonderful things like Hunt for Red October with Sean Connery's Russian accent, and which will all three of us, I'm guessing, that matters deeply to us. But I, and this is just right above our generation. This is my brother's generation again, and I didn't see either of these movies till I was an adult. But I would say you want to understand the tail end of Generation X in the cultural sort of craziness of that. Watch Bad Boys, not the Will Smith Martin
Right.
Lawrence one.
Well
Bad Boys
done
with
there.
Sean Penn and Esai Morales.
Yes.
And what's that guy we love, Andy? You know the guy.
We love a lot of guys.
The guy that's in that, he plays the bad guy. He's also in Carnival and Shawshank
Clancy
Redemption.
Brown. Clancy Brown.
Love the Clancy Brown. I'm gonna remember his name someday. And the other one is River's Edge
Nice.
with Keanu Reeves and
Yep.
Crispin Glover. And I'm saying, Daniel, if you haven't seen either of those movies, oh my God, see both. First of all, see them both. Secondly, not one after the other. It'll hurt you. And I also want to say I think that the definitive Generation X actor might actually be Sean Penn, and specifically 80s Sean Penn. Every movie he made in the 80s was like, Fast Times, Bad Boys. If it was just those two, we'd be fine.
Yeah.
But if you look at what he was doing in the 80s, it was just like he was
That's true. I like that.
earning
I like
his keep. Earning his keep.
Cool.
All right. Well, we could talk about this forever and ever. I think, honestly, can I say, I think we should do something where every month or so, the three of us watch an 80s movie and then just come together and talk about it. I'm just going to throw that out there.
Cool.
If you like it, you take it. If you don't, throw it right back.
Project Reagan way.
If you're trying to make me tear up, you're going to do it. Okay,
We
I'll
can talk
watch
about
anything.
that. We can talk about that off the air because I don't. And this, Daniel, this is unusual for ideas of Phil's. I don't hate it. I don't hate that idea.
No, and that's totally usual, by the way, because the best compliment Andy ever gives me is either I don't hate that or I don't disagree with that.
Yeah,
There you
that's
go.
true. That's true.
You mean you agree with it? I don't want to go that far.
Whoa!
I don't
Let's pump the
disagree.
brakes. Beep,
Yeah.
beep, beep. Beep,
All right.
beep, beep.
I think
All right.
we're good.
Daniel, thank you so much for stopping
Thanks,
by.
y'all. Thank you.
Folks, this has been another Second Breakfast podcast. If you have questions, comments, find us on Facebook or email questions to secondbreakfastpodcast@gmail.com. We will answer them on the air because we don't do anything else with our time. So for our esteemed guest, Daniel Carlson, and my co-host, Phil Duvall, I am Andy Roth. We'll see you again real soon. Bye-bye.
Bye now.
The most important meal of the day, second breakfast.